Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. Hey, it's Alex Williams with the New Stack here at the Open Source Summit, joined by Amy Marrich. How are you, Amy?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. And Amy, you're with the Linux Academy, correct?
Correct.
What is the Linux Academy?
The Linux Academy is online training. We started with just Linux, but now we're very heavy into the cloud. So OpenStack certification, AWS certification, just added Google Cloud, Azure. So we're trying to get as many of the clouds because so many companies are going hybrid these days.
They're going hybrid, and so they want to know about all the platforms.
Right, because it may not be one team works on this, one team works on that. It may be one engineer is working on multiple clouds.
Right, right. So you see, what are the clouds you're starting to see show up and that customers are talking about?
The new one really is, I'd say, Google Cloud. But Azure has a really strong market, and of course AWS is all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. And so what are the courses that you're offering for Google Cloud, for example?
We've got the new lowest level of the certification. We've got one full-time course author working on that, so he just did his first course that just got released like 2 weeks ago, and now he's looking at the more professional level.
People can go to linuxacademy.com?
Yes.
Great. And these courses, which ones do you teach?
I teach the OpenStack, so I have a how to install OpenStack Newton on Ubuntu course and the latest COA, which recently got upgraded from Liberty to Newton.
Okay. So you also have a background in Ansible, is that correct? We're using Ansible technology?
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about your background.
I've been in, I like to say open source before. Open source was cool, just not to date myself. But working with everything from Zope when it was...
That's when all the wizards were getting together, right?
Yeah. So basically, been doing open source, OpenStack as far as operations, went to Rackspace and worked on the Barbican project as an administrator for the system, as well as starting to contribute upstream. And then I moved into an engineering position with heat orchestration. And I've been contributing with OpenStack Ansible since about that time. Some of my friends were on the project, and I like to go where my friends are. So contributing to OpenStack Ansible, a little bit of Cinder documentation wherever I was needed.
What was the drew you besides the friends?
A good deployment makes it so much easier. When we did a Grizzly deploy with no documentation, from scratch, compiling by hand, you want to make it as easy for your users as possible. And with OpenStack Ansible, we're deploying onto LXC containers. So we're a little freer on what is going on in the background. We are now able to deploy on Ubuntu, CentOS, as well as recently OpenSUSE.
What is it about Ansible that's giving it such traction in the OpenStack community?
A lot of it's that the playbooks are easy to understand. They're easy to configure for your individual, system. So it doesn't matter if you're doing an all-in-one, which is going to be on one machine, or whether you've got like a 20-node compute system that you want to go to. So it's just really easy to configure it for your need.
So when you're offering classes around Ansible then?
Linux Academy does have classes around Ansible,
yes.
But my focus is truly on the OpenStack.
On the OpenStack. So what are you focusing now on the OpenStack then?
So as far as OpenStack, we've got a new system called Cloud Assessments coming out. So we're moving the COA course into that platform because it's going to allow us to do online instruction in a different way. So they're going to go through a scenario, and then we're going to grade their scenario, so kind of like the tests themselves. So it's all going to be performance-based. And say someone has an issue on groups in Keystone. Well, we're then going to, based on their score, refer them over to coursework to learn how to do groups in Keystone.
I see. So you're trying to, so is this part of that assessment then?
Yes.
Okay, so the assessment is meaning really this, how, for example, an engineer is managing groups.
So the assessment's going to be a scenario.
A scenario, right,
So,
right.
The one we're working on is actually kind of space-based. So you've been asked by the government agency to help with their project. So we need a group for these particular users, and these are the permissions and stuff like that. And we're going to go through and grade, and like if there's a little section that you weren't able to do, we want to help you learn that.
Okay. How do you define what courses to teach then? And what was it that you're seeing among users that led you to needing this cloud assessment course?
Well, the cloud assessment platform, when we originally designed it, was more for a company wants to assess new employees, current employees. And by tying it into the educational part, we can also then continue our mission, which is Linux Academy, of teaching and improving.
How do you like working on OpenStack?
I love OpenStack.
Why?
A lot of it's the community. I mean, we're going to help you. I mean, OpenStack Ansible is one of the most helpful projects out there, because if we don't help our operators with their errors, we can't improve our project. So if someone comes in and says, I'm trying to do this, that, or that, we're going to say, well, what's your logs? What error message are you getting? And we're going to help them get their installation going, which is a little more hands-on than some of the other projects, because we are a mix of operators as well as developers.
How is that mix unique to you?
Because it's not just a group of developers working on a project. A lot of them came out of operations. The OpenStack Ansible came out of Rackspace's RPC, and then about a year ago it actually went big tent and moved out into the actual OpenStack GitHub.
How has that gone, the big tent?
Well, Big Ten is now being folded back down.
Yeah.
And they're talking modularity of the projects. So if somebody wants to use, now Swift has always been standalone, but say someone wants to use Keystone standalone. So the goal is to make it that if somebody wants their own identity service using OpenStack Keystone, they'll be able to.
Okay. So the big tent, the big tent is coming down. What do you think are the advantages of it coming down then into this modular environment?
I think there was a lot of confusion of what big tent was. And then more projects were being added to it. So the goal was, I want to be part of Big Tent. But when you have the individual projects, you're still going to have your 6 cores, and then your 13 optionals, and then all the supporting projects. And I think the idea being that you're going to find the projects that work for your situation and your scenario. And whether you want to use something standalone, that's great for our community because it gets that one piece out there.
So how will how does modular process work?
So it's still in the early stages. Like I said, Swift is the only one who's been modular to begin with. But like part of what's going on at the project team gathering, which is going on this week in Denver, is these discussions. How can we get this modular? How can we do it? A lot of collaboration between similar projects. We don't like to necessarily rewrite the book all the time. So if projects can work together, we move forward faster.
How is it different from the process you had prior to the Big Tent?
I wasn't really involved that much before Big Tent, but there was always, the 6 cores: your compute, your networking, your identity, and then Big Tent allowed other projects in, Barbican, Cinder. So it grew to things that we thought were important, but may not have been important to the end user.
So what happened in the process? Did there was so much there that it was hard to manage priorities?
No, because each project has their own priorities. I mean, we have our overall OpenStack goals that we all want to meet.
I guess the question is, what happens when everyone goes into the Big Tent like what we saw?
So everyone goes under the Big Tent. The technical committee has, these are our big goals. You had to have certain requirements to get into Big Tent. Those requirements aren't necessarily going away, but trying to improve how users think of us and look at the project and help their understanding. I think it was confusing for people.
Yeah.
So we really listen to the feedback we get on things like the user survey,
Okay.
and then go through it and see, what are people thinking are important. I've actually been helping to analyze some of the data, and it's interesting reading people's comments, because the comments are some of the better input we get, and just seeing what trends are out there.
What themes are you finding in the data analysis that you're doing?
I mean, I can't go into a lot of detail because I did sign, but community is a really big one I'm seeing over and over and over again.
Yeah, I'm curious just on general themes. Community is one. Like what do they mean by community, though?
Some are just saying the helpfulness, the support, the fact that it's not just one company involved. So if somebody has 30 engineers working on something one week and they disappear the next week, there's still other people working on it. It's still going to be around.
Okay. So now we're moving into this more modular system, so to speak, and I guess that'll be the big effort going into Sydney with the OpenStack Summit there.
It should be.
Yeah.
Now, what they're deciding this week in Denver, unfortunately, I'm just getting Twitter feeds. Because I've been involved here at Open Source Summit. So while I was hoping to live stream with the OpenStack Ansible project, it didn't happen. But some of the groups are managing to live feed their sessions. So people who couldn't make it are still involved, which is a really great thing.
So what is your focus going into the fall and into leading into the summit? What is some of your major projects you're working on?
We're going to continue to do our OpenSUSE integration, improve security. We've got the hardening project, which is under OpenStack Ansible. And, based on the conversations this week, we'll determine where we're going.
So security in what context then?
It's hardening, making sure, we were having discussions on what we should use for a firewall. Because not everybody has Firewall D, not everybody has IP tables, but again, we want our stuff to be as user-friendly as possible, as painless as possible. So what can we use that is going to be across all three of our new platforms? Because at one point we were just Ubuntu, and then we added CentOS, and like I said, we just, with this release of Pike, added OpenSUSE.
How do you feel about the evolution of OpenStack now and kind of its, in the context that it has with other projects we see out there, such as Kubernetes and Mesos and others as well?
So Kubernetes, along with heat orchestration, can go with Magnum to have containers. Containerization is definitely the hot topic. I think if you looked at OpenStack Summit in Boston, which was the Pike, I want to say 70% of the talks were Kubernetes related.
Right.
So it's definitely the accepting of where the market's going and how can we help support that other community and put it on our platform.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for taking some time to talk. I look forward to following what you all do at the Linux Academy. You're the first person we've had on the show from the Linux Academy, and we'll be at OpenStack in Sydney, and so we look forward to seeing you there.
Great. Looking forward to it.
Thanks. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcast. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.